Focus stacking is a fantastic technique to use when shooting landscapes because it allows you to capture the scene in absolute pin sharpness from the very front of the scene. So down here, right at the front of the shot, that's going to be absolutely pin sharp, and that's going to extend all the way to the back. Now, if you're shooting a single exposure, even at f/22, you're not going to achieve the same level of sharpness as if you focus stack. And one of the added benefits of focus stacking is that you can shoot at the sweet spot of the lens, which is typically f8 or f11, and that's going to give you the sharpest results possible, albeit without the largest depth of field, and that is where the focus stacking comes in. So when you're focus stacking, you can shoot anywhere between 3 to 5 shots to ensure that you have the necessary overlap of depth of field in each shot. So this set of images here, the first one was focused down here at the bottom of the frame, the second just here, the third in the center, the fourth here, and the fifth was focused on the horizon. So we're getting absolute sharpness throughout. What we need to make sure of is that in Lightroom, the processing of each shot is identical. So just go to your first image and get it all processed up, and then hold down the Shift key and then left mouse click on the final exposure, click on sync, make sure check all is selected, and make sure that your masking is all selected if you've used that, and then hit synchronize. So once you've synced up all of your settings, you need to go through each exposure and make sure that the exposure of each is identical. So the first one we have +15, the second is +15, the third +10, fourth +10 again, and then the fifth is +35. So with all of those selected, if you click on Library and then choose the survey view, you can have a very quick look just to make sure that they're all looking good, and they are there. So what we need to do now, with all of the focus stacking exposures selected, right mouse click on one of them and then go up to Edit In and Open Layers in Photoshop. And then all of those images will be opened up as layers in Photoshop where we can begin working on them. Okay, so here are all of our shots opened up as layers, and the top one is selected by default, so I'm just going to hold down Shift and click on the bottom one so that all 5 of my layers here are selected. And then I'm going to go up to Edit and Auto Align Layers just to make sure that if there was any movement of the camera in between shots, that's accounted for. So just leave the projection on auto and hit OK, and Photoshop will work its magic. So there we have some checkerboard border around the edge of the image, so it's clear there was a small amount of movement, but that's now been accounted for, and all of these layers are now perfectly aligned. So now what we can move on to is the actual focus stacking element, which is just as simple. We just need to go back to Edit, and this time Auto Blend Layers. Photoshop automatically recognizes that it's stack images that we need to perform, and just make sure that seamless tones and colors is selected. I wouldn't recommend using content aware fill in transparent areas because you can just end up with a load of mess around the edge of the image, and you're just going to have to crop it out later anyway, and we're going to have to do some cropping. So it's much easier to see where you need to crop when you have these borders. So I'm just going to hit OK, and it's going to take a few moments for Photoshop to blend these together. Now, there is a problem that can occur when you're stacking landscape images, and it's probably 1 in 10 shots where something doesn't quite work. And this is where you get some kind of ghosting, usually in the sky, so you get some jagged clouds, or sometimes when you have flowing water in the middle of the scene, sometimes that doesn't quite blend together as it should, so you get some jagged edges and it doesn't look quite right. But I'm going to show you how to fix that But first, we're just going to run through this process here of the stacking. So there is our stacked image, and you'll see up in the sky we have some ghosting of the clouds. So that's something that we are going to have to fix. But if we just run through the image, you'll see here everything from the very front of the scene all the way to the back. Even if I zoom right in, you can see there that everything is absolutely pin sharp. But because we have this ghosting here, we need to fix that, and it's really, really simple. So rather than going all the way back to the start, we can just go into our history tab, and there we go. So we've gone back to the aligned layers. So what we need to do now is identify which of these layers occupies the area where the jagged edges have occurred. With a shot where the jagged edges occur in the center, it's a bit trickier to find, but you can just zoom in and then turn off the visibility of each layer until you find the one that occupies that area. For this particular shot, I know that it's the sky area, so that's going to be the last shot taken. So what I'm going to do is click on that layer and hit Control and J. On a Mac, that would be Command and J. And now, holding down the Control key or the Command key on the Mac, I'm using the right square bracket key, and I'm just pressing that, and I'm taking it to the top of the stack. So this layer is still aligned, which is perfect. And I'm just going to click off the visibility and then click on the layer below, hold down Shift again, and then click on the bottom layer so that all the original 5 are now selected. We're not going to blend in that top layer. We're going to do that manually in a moment. So I'm going to run the stack images again, and it's only going to apply to these 5 layers here. Okay, so there we have our stack, and once again we have our jagged clouds up in the sky. So I'm going to turn on the visibility of this layer at the top, and as it is, this has overridden everything else because it doesn't have a mask attached. So we just need to attach a layer mask by clicking on the layer mask icon at the bottom of the layers panel. Then I'm going to hold down Control and I to invert that and make it black. So now I'm going to hit D on the keyboard just to make sure that black and white are the palette colors, and using X I can toggle between the two. So I'm going to keep white in the foreground because I need to make that top layer visible. So hit B on the keyboard for the brush tool, and then now I'm just going to paint that layer back in here. So remember, if it's some jagged edges in the middle of the scene, only paint over that particular area. So now what I'm going to do, because the sky area is painted in, I'm just going to go along the horizon with a smaller brush. I'm just using the left square bracket key, and I have a soft edged brush selected, and I'm just going to run it carefully along that edge there. And the reason I'm not coming too far down is because I don't want to interfere with a sharper layer below, which will then mess up the depth of field of the shot. So while we're zoomed in, I'm just using the spacebar to scroll around. We're just going to look around the edge of the frame just to see if there's any blurring, because sometimes you do get a line of blur, and that's something that we would definitely need to crop out. So once that's been inspected, so I'm just going to hit Command and 0 so I can see the whole image, and then C to activate the crop tool. And now I'm going to change to original ratio so I can maintain the original proportions of the image, and holding down the Alt key, or that would be the Option key on a Mac. Now when I crop, everything is centered. So I'm just going to bring it in so that I take a little bit off of all 4 edges, and then once happy, just hit enter, and there we have our focus stacked image. So all that we need to do now is flatten all of these layers. So I'm going to go up to the menu at the top right of the layers panel, and it's popped out outside of the window, but I'm just going to scroll down to flatten image. That flattens the shot. So now we can apply any effects that we need to finish the image. But at this stage, I would recommend saving your image as a 16-bit TIFF if you're going to be working with layers, and then that can be resaved into an 8-bit TIFF later on if you want to maintain your layers, or a JPEG if you like to keep things flattened and compressed into a smaller file. So that is how to focus stack landscape images, and also how to resolve any issues with ghosting that sometimes occur and create jagged edges in the scene.